Okay, I've got 104. So I'll do just a quick intro and then turn it over to Toni and Annie. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining this breakout session. For the past year and a half, almost 2 years, I've worked with Toni and Annie on the ECE and ITC credential competencies, and I don't think you could be in better hands. They've really taught me a lot from the very first day. So I've always really learned quite a bit from them. They always give a great presentation. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining us. And then at the end of the session, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about tomorrow so that you have a good understanding of what's happening tomorrow during our forum. So I'd like to turn it over to Toni and Annie and thank them so much for being a part of the Higher Education Forum. If you have questions, please feel free to put those in the chat to direct it to me. I can facilitate, or to Toni or Annie, and that way we can share with everyone, and I'll open it up to both Toni and Annie.
Hi everyone, welcome. Yeah, thank you. So Toni and I are going to be walking through how we have been implementing the ECE and ITC competencies. The ITC is fully implemented, fully out there, no longer in the pilot stage, and the ITC competencies just started the pilot stage, so we're right in the beginning features of the pilot stage. Toni and I will introduce ourselves. So I'm Dr. Anni Reinking. I am an independent consultant on this specific work here with INCRA. Toni.
I'm Toni Potenza. I'm an emeritus faculty from Roosevelt University, and I have been working on the implementation of the competencies in one way or another since 2017.
Yeah, so Toni and I have been working together a lot on this, and we have people that we're working with from CBEN, which is the Competency-Based Education Network, as well as other faculty members. Some of you who I see on here have been part of the piloting or writing phases. So to overview, we started in 2020 and 2021 to implement Gateways competencies. So we've been writing the Gateways competencies in some way, shape, or form for about the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, but then we started to take the competencies. Some of you might have been part of the toolbox creation. So we created a toolbox that's on the Gateways website. The next process was then to take each specific competency and to build a module to show mastery of that competency. And that's what we started in 2020. And so with that, we engaged with 2- and 4-year programs, specifically focused first on ECE and aligning coursework to ECE. And then, as I said, now we just got done writing all of the ITC modules, and schools around Illinois are now implementing those ITC modules. So in this presentation, we're going to describe the process. I'm going to kind of do the beginning part, and then Toni's going to walk you through walk you through the website and walk you through kind of the implementation piece, because that is a big wondering with people that we work with, is how do you actually implement these modules that are focused on competencies? And so, as I said, our background today, we're going to just say, what is competency-based education? We're going to start with that. We're going to discuss who is involved. So Toni and I have been involved. I think Toni's just a little bit longer than I have. We've had other faculty members be kind of on this leadership team with us throughout the years. We've been working with people at CBEN, as well as staff at INCRA. And then how was the process completed? It is a very intense process. If any of you on the call have been part of this process, it is very intense. It is a course load work, if not more. So kudos to the faculty members who have helped in creating these modules. And so who's involved? So back in 2015, you can see that it started with EPI grant, moving on to 2017, 2019. That's when 40 fellows, in 2019 is when 40 fellows came together and really started to dive into the assessment project. And then as you see in 2020 is when we started this specific portion of the larger competency work that Illinois is doing. And as a side note, Illinois was the only state, I think still is the only state, who is doing this statewide implementation for all higher ed for early childhood. And so we have been cited and have been called out at the national level because of the amazing work that all of our faculty have been involved in.
Okay, and Annie, I apologize. I hit the screen twice and I jumped to 2 and we didn't do 1. So I'm going to go back 1.
Yeah, go for it. You're good.
1.
We're going to be
Okay.
flexible. So what is competency-based education? Now we've heard all of the great things that people around the country are asking for. People are calling Julie, people are calling Joni all the time, asking, okay, how did you do this in your state? So that is kind of where that is. But what is competency-based education? It's intentional backwards design. Just like when we talk about, we start with a summative and then we build up to the small pieces of what reaches that summative. That's how we designed the modules, because that's competency-based education. It's very rigorous, and competency must be met at an agreed upon level. So it's not that you get a letter grade, you don't get a C and say, oh, like you missed some key areas, you're not quite at mastery, but you get a C, so we're gonna move you on. You have to show mastery of that to basically kind of increase the workforce with that rigor. And it's very student-centered. The student must demonstrate the competencies when ready. They have prior learning. There are some prior learning things that can come in, experiences recognized. So it's not just seat time. One of the biggest things to kind of think about is that competency-based education is not that you've sat in my class for 3 hours once a week for 16 weeks, but that you've actually showed me competency in the competencies that we need.
And we did 2.
Yep.
Come on. I think I went too far again.
There we go. Is that the right? Yep. Oh, go back.
There we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So what is the process? So we started the process with ECE, and Toni and I really collaborated on how we were going to move through this process. We used, as I said, with people from CBEN and guidance from faculty members who were engaged with this. So we put an RFP out to both 2- and 4-year institutions, entitled institutions for ECE. And that work began in May of 2020. The RFP went out and that work began in May of 2020. So the entire fall semester of 2020, faculty who were engaged were writing modules that were associated to all of the ECE competencies. Going through many iterative cycles, you're going to see kind of the iterative nature of this work, and when we show you something here in a minute. We went through that process. ECE started piloting in January of 2021, and we immediately started writing the ITC modules. And so while ECE was piloting, ITC was writing. Both made sure to include 2- and 4-year entitled institutions. It was an iterative feedback process. The ECE, we learned some things and we changed it for the ITC model, but both models were very iterative. So that means faculty would write them in collaborative settings. They would send them to someone to review. The reviews would be sent back to the original writer. The original writer would make edits. They would send it back to the reviewers, another set of reviewers. If there were still edits, it would go back to the faculty member. So lots and lots of edits along the way. And then there was a module template that we used that was designed by an individual we worked with at CBEN that really starts with that summative at the top. We have to know what mastery looks like, and then we can start to build out the sub-competencies. We had team meetings, so not only were faculty members writing and writing and writing and writing and iterating, they were also meeting with us bi-weekly and weekly to review the modules, to talk about what does this competency actually mean? Because one of the things we learned is that many faculty members, us included, wanted to kind of take it to a higher order thinking level, but we had to really focus on what was the verb, what was the Bloom's verb, and we really had to stay at that level. And then the dissemination process. So we disseminated a statewide meeting with faculty fellows, the ECE, along with INCRA faculty conversations, and a final report. The final report is on the INCRA website. And then we also had, right now we are in the ITC phase. We submitted a final report for the writing of the ITC work, and now we are presenting to you on this work at the Higher Education Forum. Is this the next one, Toni, or did we skip one?
I think this is the next one. I'll go back and see, but I think it's the next one. Yeah, it is.
Okay,
and perfect. This is actually, it's the process.
Yeah, so this is the process. So you can see some things crossed out. This is because this is in the moment. This is what we were working on. So you can see these iterative processes. So each group, so this is just one group's project plan. For ITC, we had 2 groups working simultaneously that were assigned specific competencies. And for the ECE module or ECE module writing phase, we had 3 groups working. And so you can see the competency is written. It was sent off to some individuals from NLU and Heartland to review. They were sent back to the original writer. They made changes. They were then sent to some consultants, including Toni and myself. They were provided more reviews. They were sent back. Sometimes that cycle ended after the second review. Sometimes that cycle went on past 3 reviews because we really wanted to make sure that this was the best kind of module put forward. After this process, you can see that we also have something on here that says S&S. So that is a scope and sequence. We learned in the ECE implementation that we wrote all the modules and then we did a scope and sequence of where things fell. That was backwards. What we needed to do is we needed to start with a scope and sequence. And so we engaged all of our team members, all of the faculty in writing what is the scope and sequence for HGD? How are we going to see all of the needed areas with an HGD flow? So then we have a plan for writing the modules across. So we not only wrote them before the modules, but then after all of the modules were written, we had someone review to make sure that the scope and sequence stayed valid, that was valid. And then once all of these are written, we then pilot. So ECE was done piloting. Through the piloting phase, we learned things. Some of that learning, we changed some of the modules. We edited some of them based on student feedback and faculty feedback. And in ITC, we are in that process of gaining feedback from faculty and students in order to make edits if needed.
Okay.
Is this still me?
Is this still you?
Okay, so pilot. So as I said, we piloted with data collection. So when we piloted the ECE, every single student who took a module had to fill out a student survey, and every faculty member needed to fill out a survey. That was one of the most important pieces of this work because it was actually students and faculty using them rather than just as we're writing them, conceptualizing how they might be used, but actually using them. And so that data collection and survey analysis was what we used for that final revision piece for the modules to make them the best possible modules we could. And then also faculty meetings. So during the piloting phase, so both for ECE last year during piloting and right now in the spring of 2022, we are meeting with ITC faculty who are implementing it to talk about rough areas, to talk about smooth areas, to talk about how implementation is going. What are some ideas that you're coming about when you're implementing? Just kind of a brainstorming session with ITC faculty once a week or once a month.
One of the things that we learned, the NLU Coffee House was through the ECE pilot implementation, and National Louis realized that their students needed more support just to navigate a module because this was a new way of learning for them. And so they set up what they called the Coffee House. And I don't know if it was once a month or once a week, they would have an opportunity for the students to meet with an advisor who would deal with some of their other issues like financial aid or course advising as well, but also just help them to navigate through the modules. What is really being asked of you in this summative assessment? And that kind of support was important for the student success. So interestingly, National Louis presented this at a faculty meeting, and then very quickly all of the other piloting ECE faculty established something like this. I don't know whether they called it a coffee house or not. They put that aspect of student support into the program. So it was that kind of sharing that happened at faculty meetings. Yeah.
And Toni, I think that's an important fact, that it can be student-centered, right? So
Right.
One of the big areas that we have conversations with about faculty is I just have to do this. I just have to give this module and it has to be exactly this way. Yeah, it's good to give the module, but you still need to use good teaching practices to support students, whatever that support may look like. For NLU, it's coffee houses. A lot of other people did that. For some others, it might be individual meetings, but you still individualize the instruction for what the students need, knowing that in the end, they do need to complete the summative assessment to show that competency.
Yeah, I think that in the design of the modules, people may have thought, because this was meant to be online and the modules include the assessments, include the learning activities, include formative assessments, that this is something that a student can do independently. And although part of the idea is that, yes, this is done online and students in competency-based education can take the time they need to do the work and can be pretty independent in their learning, it doesn't mean that it is hands-off for faculty. And we learned very quickly that students still needed the teaching and the support that faculty offer. So that is something that needs to be built in as well. Okay, and this is yours too, Annie.
Yep, and so the ITC changes based on feedback. So we did all of ECE and we learned a lot from ECE, and so we did do changes. We added in a mentor kind of part of that feedback cycle. So originally in ECE, we had Group A evaluating Group B's work and Group B evaluating Group C's work, and that was a lot. Not only are you writing, but you're also reviewing others' work. And so what we did this time is we said we still need those faculty eyes, kind of that mentoring or peer mentoring piece, but instead of asking groups to do that while they're writing, we're going to bring in some additional consultants. So we had Heartland and NLU come in and help with that kind of analysis piece, that first review of, is this module really addressing the competency? And then, as I said earlier, we learned in the ECE module, in the module development, that we cannot leave the scope and sequence to the end, because that made for a lot of hiccups with changing some of the modules, because we realized we were missing some things. And so in the ITC implementation, we said we're going to start with the scope and sequence and think through all of the modules within a certain area to make sure that we are hitting on the specific things that we know are just good practices within ITC within the ITC courses. We also, through this process of the scope and sequence, they had the competency, they broke it down by sub-competencies, so kind of those goals to reach that competency. And then we also had them outline the activities and the assessments. So basically they were doing an outline of what they were gonna then write in the modules in this scope and sequence, because we wanted to make sure that we were really looking at what the competencies were asking. Before they then started writing the modules, there was external reviews of the scope and sequence in the same iterative cycle that we talked about with each of the modules. So there's constantly things being written and things are provided feedback. It's just a constant. Every Friday they would get an email from me saying, okay, here's everything that's due and here's everything you're getting back. And so there's that constant feedback loop.
Okay, so now it's time to take you on a tour of a module so you can see what it is that we spent, we in the broadest sense spent 2 years producing for ECE and for ITC. So there, the module came to us as a template from the Competency-Based Education Network. And again, the structure of the module, very broadly speaking, is that it's backwards design. So you begin with the competency, and the first question that you have is, what is that competency saying? And what is the behavior? What is the performance that you want to see to know that that competency has been achieved? So as you can imagine, a lot of our discussions in those weekly and biweekly meetings was really looking at those competency statements and saying, what is this competency saying? What is it that you want to see a student do that assures you that the student has attained that competency? So the first components of the module are the competency statement. What is the competency that we're looking at? And the introduction to the module, sort of giving you an overview of what's going to be included in it. And then the summative assessment. That's an extremely important part. That is really what tells you that the competency has been attained. The rubric is the rubric that you would find on the toolbox. We did not have different rubrics for the modules. The modules are using the rubrics that are aligned with each of the competencies. And the summative assessments have to be aligned to the rubrics. And we're all set up to be aligned to the rubrics that are in the toolbox. The next part of the module is the subcompetencies, and Annie described the subcompetencies. The subcompetencies are the components of the competency. They may be the steps that lead to the competency. They may be aspects of the competency that are really detailed. And the subcompetencies were taken from the rubric, and in some cases were taken from other rubric language that showed behaviors and skills that were aligned with that rubric. And if you look at the ECE rubrics, you will see that there are behaviors and skills that are aligned to each of the competency rubrics. So our subcompetencies came directly from the rubrics, were related directly to the rubrics in terms of rubric language or behaviors and skills. And they formed the steps that would take you to the attainment of the competency. The next piece is the learning activities, and learning activities included open resource materials. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get deeper into this. And, but that might be readings, videos, articles, anything though that you could find through the internet that would be available for students without having to purchase textbooks or buy subscriptions to things. And then finally, formative assessments. And the formative assessments act as feedback to the faculty member who is teaching the course, and also provide practice for the students and are linked to back to the summative assessment as well. Okay, so let's take a look. And what we are going to be focusing on is the competency module that was developed for ECE, Health, Safety, and Wellbeing Module 1, or Competency 1. And I'm just going to give a shout out for all of these slides to Jonna Dara Ernst, who's getting now 2 shout outs in this meeting, because you may be familiar with some of these slides because they've been presented before. And Jonna is a developer, and I'm a developer too of these slides. So shout out to Jonna. So we begin, every competency module begins with the competency statement. So HS1 says, articulates components of a safe and healthy environment. Okay, that is a great competency. What does that mean? And so we're going to move forward with this to look at the subcompetencies to see how all of that was broken out. But that's the start, is the competency statement. And then there is an estimate, and I emphasize that this is an estimate of the number of hours it would take to complete the entire module That's the summative assessment and all of the learning activities. For this module, it's 14 hours. We got that from looking at reading times for the articles that were submitted, best estimates of how long it would take to do the assessments. But I have to say that this number is going to vary really by the learner more than anything else. It is, you're going to have some students who can go through a module in no time at all, and other students who are going to struggle more with it. So this is a best guess, but it is not a set in stone amount of time that it takes to complete the module. And some of the feedback that we have been getting as the modules are piloted are that these numbers are good or they're not good. And so we take that into consideration. If someone says it's too long, then we know we have to go back and look to see if we need to adjust that in some way. Okay. So competency description, and I'm not going to read this to you, but basically, if you do take a quick look through it, you will see that it starts out in an engaging way, engaging the learner. It's addressed to the learner. It's addressed to the person who is going to do this module. And so it's a little bit of background on what is included and why it's important for you to know this. You're an early childhood professional, you're going to need, the most basic thing you're going to need to know is how to keep children safe and healthy. That's basic to the work you're going to do with young children. And then what is this module about? In the second paragraph, the foundational knowledge across a wide range of health and safety topics that you need to know about. And then going on into more detail about what it is that you're going to learn when you get through this module. And then finally, what the assessment is going to be. What is the assessment going to ask you to do? And so that's it. It's not lengthy, it's not chapters, it's not even more than a few paragraphs, but it is to get the learner in the groove and familiar with what is going to happen as they go into this module. Okay. The sub-competencies. Again, these come from the rubric language, the behaviors and skills that are associated with the rubric. And here you can see, if you compare this to the competency statement, which is, provides or understands, can articulate what the components are of a safe and healthy environment. Now we're into the weeds about what that means when what we're talking about. So here there are 5 sub-competencies that include abuse and neglect, strategies to maintain a safe environment for children indoors and outdoors, food preparation and handling, ongoing wellness practices, and record keeping, ethical record keeping. So that's a lot to cover in one competency area, but it is spelled out in the sub-competencies. And these sub-competencies, each of them then becomes the basis for the learning activities that are going to follow. It also is the basis for what is going to be included in the summative assessment. So now we come to the summative assessment, and what we talk about is, again, the estimated time to complete it, which again is an estimate, not written in stone. The type of assessment that it is, this is a level 1. And what Annie talked a little bit about, how we started looking at those Bloom's verbs and what it is that you needed to do according to the way the verbs were included. This competency is about articulating the components of a safe and healthy environment. So the description of the summative assessment means that that's what you're asking your students to do. They are not implementing. They are not writing a policy manual. They are telling you at this very basic level, level 1, what are the components of a safe and healthy environment. And they're describing what those pieces are. And then talking about the resources that they could use to make sure that that is a healthy and safe environment. And here, what the task is, it's essentially creating information sheets that would help your colleagues, early childhood professionals, understand about each of those 5 areas that were covered in the module. So essentially, it's reiterating those pieces of information that will be covered in the learning materials and the formative assessments. With the goal,
Toni,
yeah.
Just as a note, as we're walking through this, Toni is literally walking through how the document is set up. I was trying to see if I could find a blank one to share with you all, but really the summative assessment is at the top with the so everything is introduced kind of on the first and second page. So it's not at the end, it's really
Right.
at the top.
Yes, this is the start. And even though we don't anticipate that you'll have any, or certainly not many, but not anybody who will decide to do a summative assessment without looking at any of the learning activities. The point of this is that the learner from the start knows what they're going to be assessed on to show their competency. So it's upfront how we are going to measure this. In developing the assessments, again, we look very closely not only at what the content was that was covered and the skills that were covered in the competency, but what the level was. So looking again at that Bloom's language. So at a level 1, you wouldn't expect implementation. Or a level 2, I'm sorry, you wouldn't expect implementation, but you would expect them to be able to tell you or to describe to others what that knowledge, that basic knowledge is. Okay. The rubric. Again, this is the rubric that you would find in the toolbox for HSW1. And you can see all of the pieces that are included in there that are in the subcompetency: abuse and neglect, maintenance of a safe and risk-free indoor environment, food preparation and handling procedures, ongoing wellness activities, which includes contagious disease prevention and procedures, nutritional practices, record keeping. All of those pieces that were in the subcompetency are here in the rubric. Okay, the learning activities and the resources associated with them. Once again, breaking out the time that it would take to complete this. Again, an estimate of the time. And we're going to look just at the learning activity that is connected with subcompetency 1, and just one of the 2 activities. You can see it says here that there are 2 activities that are tied to subcompetency 1. This is just the first learning activity for it. So the way that the learning activities are set up, there is a section that is getting started. And as the introduction to the module is directed at the learner and is meant to draw the learner into the module, for each of these learning activities, there is a getting started that has the same goal. How do we bring the student in? How do we give them an introduction to what they are going to learn? This is the place where you will give some background about what is included in the learning activity and explain a little bit about what is going to be included in this learning activity? What is it that you are going to learn? What is it that you are going to do in this learning activity? And so all of that is included. Yeah.
And I just want to point out again that all of the materials are open resource, OER. So I know that was on one of the things that Toni talked about right at the beginning of this, but with the example activities, they are open sourced. And so sometimes there may be updates that are needed. We found that out, that one of the websites we use a lot updated everything. And so all of our links were bad, but you will see that nothing should be blocked by any financial barrier.
Okay, let me back up. I hit the wrong thing here. Okay, so we have two materials in here. One is an actual module that the person who developed this found online. We found ourselves using a lot of the materials on the Head Start website. Their Eastern Connecticut State University has a lot of great videos that are open resource.
BLS,
right? The Iris Center at Vanderbilt has a lot of open resources. And so we took advantage of being able to use those materials. And so the module recognizing the warning signs of child abuse and neglect is something that we would then ask the student to go in and complete the elements of that module as the learning activity that they would be doing. Yeah, there's the instructions here. Complete the learn section of this module, including information on know, see, and do. Another article, what is child abuse and neglect, recognizing the signs and symptoms, and then with a little bit of instruction of what we wanted the learner to do with that article, what to focus on, what to think about, what are the important pieces that you might want to see. Other types of materials, we would have videos, we would have webinars. So some of the webinars tended to be quite long. Whatever was available, pertinent and relevant to the topic. I want to add that INCRA has also, in the course of this year, created some videos that will be available to faculty at different institutions. And the videos include both interviews with teachers and directors on specific topics. We had topics on safe and healthy environment, outdoor environment, indoor environment. We had, I think, parent conferences was another area where teachers and parents would talk about what made a successful parent conference, parent interview. And then there are a couple of videos that are really just, could be used for observational purposes. There isn't a real structure to them that follows a certain path, but that actually just allows you to show a classroom environment or to be able to follow a child without having any overlay on it. And those were designed because faculty were asking for those kinds of tools. One of the things with the learning activities and even some of the summative assessments is that we grappled with is, it's very desirable, I think, for us as faculty to send our students into the field and say, go observe a classroom or go observe a student in a classroom setting. And what we had to grapple with was, what do we do if we have students who don't have access to a classroom, particularly in the COVID world, don't have access to a classroom or don't have access to kids? So we looked for videos that would be able to provide that ability to just observe something without having an agenda put on the video by the people who made the video. If you can understand, if you get what I'm saying, like this is a video about safety issues in my classroom. Well, it's if you want a student just to see the different learning centers in the classroom, they may be able to see that through the safety video, but it's not going to, it may be geared towards looking at certain things and not let them see the whole of what you want them to see. So INCRA stepped in, Gateways stepped in to bridge that gap and created this set of videos that are going to be available to faculty for their use as well.
And Toni, I'll just say that the videos have been edited now, and just as soon as the forum is over, I'll have an opportunity then to take a minute and put those up on our website. We have both infants and toddlers and older children, so it will help to connect to both of the ITC and ECE credentials for faculty to use those resources.
Yeah. Okay. And then finally on our tour is the formative assessment. And the formative assessment for that learning activity, every one of the learning activities had the open resource materials and then a formative assessment connected to it that would allow for practice and of what was learned in that activity. And so in this case, the formative assessment was a graphic organizer where you can read the directions defining each type of abuse or neglect, and then listing with the type in a big circle, and then for each of the three adjacent circles, three connecting circles, to put in a sign for each of those. So very much related to the materials and the readings that were done, looking at child abuse and neglect and how you would know that a child was being abused and neglected. Here is the practice for it. One of the things that we worked very hard with the faculty on was developing formative assessments that would be quick, because you don't want this to be a lengthy process that is going to be another summative assessment. You want this to be a quick grasp of learning, and that would be engaging and interesting for the learner. And I know Annie with the ECE group did a whole documentation of all the different types of formative assessments. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's an important piece.
Yeah, so there's lots and lots of different ways to do formative assessment. And so there's a website which I don't have bookmarked anymore, but they go through different ways to do formative assessment. So formative assessment could include an elevator speech. Formative assessment could include tweeting something, right? So 280 characters, engaging in asynchronous conversations, videotaping or audio recording yourself, doing it like a podcast type of short segment. And so really thinking outside the box, we pushed against write a 2-page paragraph, or if we saw too many writing activities, we pushed back and said, hey, let's think outside the box. And so really thinking like, how can you utilize technology in that way to think about that formative assessment?
And the point of the formative assessments is to give feedback to the faculty member on the student's learning and how the learner understands, and also to be a way of connecting the faculty member and the learners. So this becomes something that is submitted to the faculty for a review, and that the faculty member can give feedback to the student on what they are doing, and helps them to decide does the student need more time, more practice, or can they move ahead into the next learning activity? So this is a communicative device, as well as being something that gives feedback both to the learner and to the faculty.
And you can really individualize with this, right? So like Toni said, you get to know where your students are. And this is not, one of the things that we have to remember is that with competency-based education, we have mastery of the competency. We don't have grades along the way. We have formative feedback along the way to make sure that the student will be successful in the summative assessment, but that we want to see competency of the competency, mastery of the competency, rather than just checking off boxes to check off boxes.
Yeah. So those are the components of every one of the modules: the introduction, the competency statement, the summative assessment, all at the beginning, the rubric that measures the summative assessment, the subcompetencies that define what the learning activities are going to be, the learning activities, which include open access resources, and formative assessments. So they all follow that pattern. They are all identical in following that format. Come on. I keep losing my arrows down here. My apologies. Where is it?
So one of the things as Toni is moving the slides along is thinking about how we do have questions, but also thinking about how we use the modules. So yeah, I was going to dive into that. So yeah, Toni, do you want to take that one?
Dive in, go ahead.
Okay, so you embed the curriculum as a whole. So you don't take pieces out of the module. You don't take this activity and then take this activity and then hope that they have and get the mastery of the competency. It really is built in to build on each other in order to be successful in that summative assessment. Now, you can individualize it for students. You can still have your own flair to it, with the idea that the summative assessment is really what shows that mastery. Almost everyone that we're working with is implementing it into their LMS system, whether it's Blackboard or ReggieNet or Canvas or Moodle, whatever it is, they're implementing it into their LMS system, and they are not just taking the document and uploading it. They are really piecing it apart. They are providing a module. They are putting in the overview, the activities as assignments or things to complete with the summative assessment. It really does walk students through that. One of the biggest learning pieces for students and sometimes for faculty is the amount of time that it takes. That it's not just another assignment. You can't take this and put it in what you probably normally would do in you can't do a whole full course and then decide to put in the modules. You really need to embed the modules into your course to show those competencies. And so using the summative assessments as written, the summative assessments really need to be used to fidelity. They cannot be changed, but the learning activities can be molded to what your students need, right? Molded to how you like to run your course, knowing that they need to show competency in that summative assessment at the end. As faculty, you're a facilitator, you're teaching the course just like you would any other course. The teaching aspect of the course does not change. As then you're, just as with other assignments that you do in your course, you're providing that support. What is different than probably many of us do when we design courses is that this is little teeny tiny pieces all building up to then complete one big assignment. And these little teeny tiny pieces are meant to provide feedback, not just to provide a grade. So it is a little bit more intense on the faculty side if you're not used to providing that really immersive and intense feedback so that students can have that success at the end.
Yeah. The only thing that I would add, I'm still sort of thinking about the first two pieces up here on how the modules have been used. A couple of our institutions have taken those modules and offered them separately from a course. And that type of piloting has been done if they are working, say, with an experimental group, a cohort of learners who might be working in childcare settings and coming in to take to do the modules for Gateway's credential, maybe with course credit attached to it, but not particularly as part of a degree program. They are separate from a degree program. And so I know that ISU with the ECE modules had a cohort of people who were just doing the modules as written. They were not embedded into any of their courses. And I know that I think Roosevelt is going to do the same with the ITC module with a group of infant toddler teachers from Bright Horizons. And they are going to offer those modules separate from their courses with, I think, a 12 credit hour kind of lump sum that the students will get if they complete the modules that they're doing. But for the most part, when people have been piloting the modules, they have been looking at where they fit in their curriculum. And so have been putting 1, 2, 3, maybe as many as 4 modules into a course, using the resources, using the formative assessments, using the summative assessment as course requirements.
And so, Toni, with that, the idea is, again, you take a whole module and you put it into a course. Yes, you're going to break it apart in the LMS system, but taking a module and doing some of the activities in one course and some of the activities in another course, and then having the summative assessment in one of those courses or another one is not how modules are designed.
No.
It's all in one course. So
Right.
You're going to do it all in one course.
Right, right.
So what questions do you all have? I don't have any on my end. Julie, I don't know if anyone has brought questions to your end, or Toni on your end, since they have to send them directly to us.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I haven't seen anything, but I suppose we could just ask people now.
Yeah,
Right.
You can open it up and we can unmute yourself.
So I have one on my end. When adding the modules at the university, how do we ensure that they have not been already done at the community college? Toni?
I would have to say that you probably need to talk to your colleagues at the community college and find out which ones they are implementing. It's difficult because if a 2-year institution will do the modules at levels 2, 3, and 4. At a 4-year institution, you would do the modules at level 5, but you may, in some of your courses, be doing the content that is at levels 2, 3, and 4, and would want to include that in your courses. So my gut feeling for that is that you would look at the level of the module and you would think about it in the same way that you would think about transferring courses from a 2-year institution. I mean, when you look at your transfer arrangements, generally you transfer courses that you would say are covering the same content from the 2-year institution that you would cover in your introductory courses at the 4-year institution.
Julie,
and then,
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, but I think that the best thing to do is to talk to the 2-year institutions to see if they are implementing, because I know that there are some courses where it's a trickier question to decide whether you're going to transfer or not, because even though you have introductory information in that course, you take it all the way through up to the level 5. And so that's where you might want to have a conversation. This is an interesting piece, because with the competency-based model, as we heard earlier today, you might want to think about restructuring your courses so that rather than having them be by content areas, this is an old Joni issue too. Joni brought this up a couple of years ago, sort of knocked us all off our seats. Instead of organizing our courses by content so that all levels for child, family, and community, all levels for human growth and development are included in one course, that you have level 2 courses, level 3 courses, level 4 courses, level 5 courses, which would make it a whole lot easier to transfer based on the gateway's levels, and also to separate out what modules would be included in which place. It's such a sensible idea. I recognize it's much easier to talk about it than to do it.
Any other questions? And I think you guys can come off mute. I don't know if they have that limited on your end, but you can type them into Toni, Julie, or myself, or come off mute if you have a question.
And I just wanted to remind everybody on this breakout that the ECE modules are available. And you just need to send me an email with your Gmail account, and then we can give you access to those modules. So if anybody here would like that, just please send me a note in the chat, or you can just send me an email, jlindstrom@incra.org. I'll put that in the chat.
And it does have to be a Gmail account. So if you don't have a Gmail account, you'll need to get one. So you can't, if you don't have Gmail for your university, you can't access them. So you'll have to use some, like I have to use my personal one, right? So like you may need to use your personal one because it is, you have, in order to get behind the block wall, you need to have a Gmail account.
And as Joni said, we've had about 35 or so faculty in the past month access it. And we will be doing, I won't call it a survey, but we will circle back to see if you're able to access and if you're using them. We really do want to know if you're using them, since we put these in that Dropbox for your review to use.
Yeah, as Annie said, you can personalize these modules. In the piloting process, obviously, because we wanted to see, how effective these modules were, we really kind of constrained the piloters to doing the modules as written, to not adding or removing anything. But the critical piece for measuring competency is that summative assessment. And so that has to be kind of as is. But if you have a wonderful article that you would add to the set of articles for a learning activity, add it for your class. That's great. If you want to do the formative assessment as a group activity, which I think even a few of our piloters are doing, the formative assessments when they are doing these modules in an in-person class, they are sometimes doing the formative assessments as group activities instead of as individual activities in class. That's fine. That is a totally perfect thing to do. You have much more freedom than our piloters did in the way that you use the resources of the modules. Mostly because we really wanted to see how those modules worked. But for you in your implementation in classes, you should be implementing them certainly as a whole, but they're still modifiable in the way that they are used.
Any other questions?
I'm not sure how long our session was supposed to go for, but I know it's almost 2 o'clock now.
Yeah, just got 2:01. So I can start to wrap things up if we don't have any other questions. I'm not seeing anything come in. I do thank the people who have sent me direct messages with their Gmail accounts. I will have you added to our list for access. So thank you. So I'd just like to conclude by saying thanks to Toni and Annie for going through this presentation for us. I certainly, again, just learn new things each time that I'm with them. So thank you. And thanks to everybody for joining this session.